Okay, it's a good hair day. There's this big glowing orb thing in the sky that I believe is called a sun. It's easy for us to forget that here in East Tennessee because it hasn't been out for quite a few days. So I figured why not film number 2 of the Virus Diaries. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Leigh Monet. I normally do skincare videos, but since we are going through this very weird, very unusual, very unsettled time, I thought I would just do a few videos every few, maybe 2-3 days, just talking about life a little bit as we're going through this virus stuff, as we are self-isolating. I'm self-isolating, partly because I was already self-isolating because I wasn't even working a job before, and I'm especially not doing anything now. I have been trying to establish a career as an actor, and obviously that's on indefinite hold. You know, this happened back when I was doing this the last time when I moved down to Atlanta in 2007. And then of course what happened in like 2008 and 2009 was the big implosion of the economy, the last big recession. Maybe it's me. That's the common denominator that I see right there. That's a little scary. I'm sorry if it's my energy that's causing this, or my desire to create this career in entertainment. But anyways, so yeah, it is the day that I'm filming this. It is Wednesday, it is the 25th. Yes, it's Wednesday, March 25th, and the virus is still in full swing. I don't have any idea I don't really want to get into super specifics about like death tolls and things like that, just because you can get caught up in numbers, and sometimes that can just cause more panic. That's kind of unnecessary. But the city that I live in, we're not on a strict like shelter in place or anything like that. We're also not as hard hit as places like New York City and California. So and Seattle, those areas seem to be some of the harder hit ones. But there are cases in this area. In fact, a young woman who goes to my church works at Walmart, and she said one of her coworkers was, I believe, being tested. So there's a chance that that person could have the virus. So, I mean, it's here and it's coming, and who knows what kind of impact it's going to have. But let's not talk about super horribly depressing things. In my last Virus Diary number 1, I mentioned that I showed a whole stack of books, and one of the books in particular that I was reading at the time it still is called The Wisdom of the Shire. That has not changed. But I finished this, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was a really wonderful thing to read right now while we're going through this weird stuff. Is it a romantic or romanticized vision of life? Of course it is. If you don't like The Lord of the Rings, if you don't like the Hobbits, if you don't like all that world, you would hate this, obviously. I mean, I shouldn't have to say that, but I will, just to point out that if you're not into that kind of stuff, this would probably come off as totally goofy and silly to you. But I really enjoy The Lord of the Rings. I really enjoy getting lost in a world like that. I enjoy the message, if there's a message, you know, that there's a sense of adventure, but it's also showing how working towards a goal can sometimes be really difficult, and sometimes there's loss. And sometimes when you come out at the end of it, you're not the same. You probably aren't going to be the same person. You probably shouldn't be the same person. So I like that. I like the adventure. I like getting lost in a totally different world to our own, but it has parallels to our lives. And that's what the author Noble Smith goes through in this book, talking about some of those parallels from the book into like our life. And he usually does that in each chapter. He'll set it up with what is happening, a certain aspect of life from the Hobbit point of view, or he also has some stuff about the elves and Gandalf and the men and all that fun stuff. But most of it is centered around the hobbits and their philosophy of life and how they live and how they treat others and how they treat one another and all of that fun stuff. And yes, it's a very romantic sort of view. And it's very sweet. Like I said, at a time like this where we can all get caught up in anxiety and fear and uncertainty and everything, I think something like this, something that's very kind of sweet and positive, can be a really good thing. I think for me it was really good just to read something that was nice and positive and enjoyable. And I did take away a few things from it. So there's some like overarching, I don't know if you could call them themes, but this idea of coziness. The Hobbits love to eat local food. You know, that's become a kind of a big thing, sort of a locavore, local food movement type of thing. Really getting in touch with where you live and doing more things locally. We're hearing a lot about local businesses right now because so many of them are smaller businesses and they're suffering a lot. So this idea of being really in touch with where you are and where you live, eating food from where you are, being in touch with the people who live where you live in this very global world that we live in, you know, where we can get in touch with people all around the world, and that's kind of cool, but sometimes we lose sight of where we are located. We can get all caught up in wanting to travel and wanting to go other places, but we lose sight of where we are right now. And I think we're getting a little bit of a taste of some of the dangers associated with being able to travel all over the place really easily and quickly, because other things that are dangerous to us, like viruses, can also travel and get around really quickly because we can. But it also is a nice time to really get in touch with our local area, the local businesses, whether they be local restaurants or storefronts, clothing stores, you know, anything like that. I think it's a nice reminder that we have people who live in this area who own businesses and provide services and do stuff for us that we can connect with. Or like local filmmakers. I actually was told about a lockdown film festival in the city where I live, and it's a Facebook event, and they had certain rules, like it's a 1 to 3 minute film, and you could have, I think, up to 5 people helping you on it, and it had to be either in your house or on your property. So it could be in your house or like house and yard or something like that, but it had to be your property. It wasn't something that you could do outside of that. Like I said, 1 to 3 minutes. There were a few other rules that they've set up, and they're taking submissions all this week, and they're going to be judging the films, and they're going to be putting them up on their Facebook page so everybody can watch them. I didn't feel like I was ready to take on that challenge. I definitely want to work towards being a filmmaker, but I wasn't quite ready for that yet. But I am following the page so I can watch the films, and so I can get some ideas about how people do something like that in these very constrained circumstances. So I'm really fascinated to see what happens with that. I believe that ends this Friday as far as like the filmmaking has to be done, and then they're going to upload them to a certain place, and then they'll be judged, and I believe they're going to be putting them all out onto the Facebook page so we can watch. I'm really looking forward to that. So that is something that you may want to look into in wherever you live, if there are filmmakers or artists or people like that in your area. And I don't live in a big, huge metropolitan area. I live in a fairly mid-sized area. So there are people out there who are doing stuff. So they may be doing, in fact, they probably are doing a lot of things online because they can't do things in person right now. So there are webinars going on. There's a children's theater in this town that is being run by people that I know, people that I've worked with, and they were going to be doing, I think, like a series of like talkback Q&As with people, like people who had worked with that children's theater years ago and are coming back as theater professionals and other theater professionals, and they were going to do it obviously as a live event. Well, they can't do that now, so they're doing it as a Zoom event, and so more people can join in. So that's kind of a good thing that's happening out of some of this, is that we have stuff that we can now do that you might not have been able to do before because you might not have been able to go to the live event, but now you can participate via some sort of webinar, Zoom, virtual digital event. So, I mean, it's not a great reason that we have to do this, but you know, that's one sort of positive thing. Okay, back to Wisdom of the Shire really quick. Like I said, it's a sweet little romantic book. If you don't like Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, all that stuff, you're gonna hate it, so don't even try. But there were a couple of takeaways that sort of impressed themselves on me. One of those was the writing in The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, things like that. One of the lessons is gain wisdom, but don't let it taint your goodness. And he was using Gandalf and Saruman as the sort of the opposing views of that. So Gandalf gains wisdom, but it doesn't taint his goodness, whereas Saruman does. He gets greedy. Saruman gets greedy, and he's one of the bad guys, really. And yet he didn't start off that way. So take that as a lesson. You know, yes, you want to gain wisdom and you want to gain knowledge, but you don't want to let it taint whatever essential goodness that you have. And sometimes that can happen with us people. You don't have to be a wizard to have that happen. So that was one good thing. And another thing that I thought was really interesting was encouraging us to take the long view. So think about how your actions right now could affect somebody in the future. I really think that for us anybody who's paying attention to things like the environment, the natural world, and seeing what's happening, it's really easy to get caught up. And we're seeing some of those tensions right now. People are talking about we need to let businesses reopen because it's going to destroy the businesses, but then health professionals and scientists are saying if we do that too quickly, we're going to cause unnecessary deaths because this virus thing is so easily transmitted and you can be carrying it for so long and not know it. So we have this tension between, these businesses need business, obviously. They need to sell stuff. So we live in a hyper-capitalistic society where we need to sell things and make money. But the flip side, the dark side, if you want to call it, the not so great side of that is when something like this disrupts that capitalism, when a business can't sell online or, can't, as they say, pivot to change things, then maybe shows some of the cracks in the structure of what we're living in as far as this hyper-capitalistic, hyper-money focused society is. So taking the long view and thinking about, okay, yes, this is going to be, in some cases, it's going to be irreparably harmful to some businesses, and that's horrible. That's so sad. But on the other hand, you open up business and then cause more people to get sick and maybe spread it to more people, and then more people will die. So you feel for the business owners, but you also feel for families and people who could be getting sick, who might not have gotten sick if business had been closed longer, if people were self-isolating or even being quarantined longer. So those tensions between thinking about the here and now and how what I'm doing right now can affect the long view, can affect what happens in the future. Those are just a couple of things that I took away from it. Like I said, it's a very sweet book. It's a very romanticized sort of vision of the world, but I enjoyed it. I think for right now, it was really good. And I could definitely feel some parallels between, it reminded me of so many parallels between The Lord of the Rings and what we're going through right now in some weird way. This idea of being in this up against an enemy, and yeah, you can defeat something, but you're not going to be the same person after it. And I talked about that some in my last video. But anyways, I highly recommend it. There were a couple of passages that kind of stuck with me. They just made a little bit of an impression on me. And one of them is about knowing your limits. Knowing your own limits is a concept that is not taught very often. We're told to push ourselves at all costs in a victory or nothing society. Winner takes all. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. These are the hubristic apparitions of a trickle-down world. Gandalf might be a cranky old coot sometimes, especially with Peregrine Took, but he does not suffer from an ounce of hubris. Saruman and Sauron possess this flawed character trait of overweening pride, and it is the downfall of them both. Hobbits are the ultimate underdogs, the little guy, and neither one of the villains sees them coming before it's too late. And there were a couple other things that I thought were kind of nice, but I'll leave it at that. This idea of, sometimes help can come from the unlikeliest of places, things like that. It's all very, very sweet and maybe a bit much for some people, but I enjoy the stories and I really enjoyed this book. So if you get a chance to read it, go for it. I am working on more books. Right now, I actually finished a book about the flowers of William Morris that I had even before I went for my stack of books last week. That was a lovely thing to read. I love reading about William Morris and seeing his art and the way he was able to incorporate his artistic temperament into, speaking of capitalism, into a business model. He grew up in a fairly privileged position, but he also was a person who enjoyed working with his hands. I've heard stories of him. His arms were dyed from the indigo dye because he would be out there dyeing fabric, because he was actually working, because he thought it was a great thing to work with your hands and to create things. So that idea of creating and being in touch with nature and using nature as a way to create not only something that's artistically beautiful, but also that is really useful. I like that, and so I really enjoyed that book. I'm also reading a book of Mary Oliver poetry, 12 Moons, which has been excellent so far. I'm trying to read like a handful of poems from that every day just to kind of keep myself grounded. I don't totally understand poetry, but I like it. And I'd go ahead and read it even though I don't always understand it. But her poetry is very based in nature and the natural world and animals and plants and the sky and beautiful things. But also looking at some of the less beautiful, what we consider like the less beautiful aspects of it and how that's all a part of life. So I really enjoy that. There's a couple other things that I think could be really useful right now. Scott Kelly wrote an article just recently about how to live in isolation. He is an astronaut who was on the International Space Station for a year. So if anybody understands isolation, it's Scott Kelly. So I'll link to that down below. It has some really interesting insight in how he dealt with being in that very enclosed space, in space, for such a long time. And one of the things that he did was he read books, and he said he really thinks that's a great idea because that helps you escape. And I totally agree. I'm a book fiend at any time, no matter what's going on. So I 100% support that idea. You can also, I mentioned Skillshare and lynda.com in the last video about the virus, and I had forgotten about another resource called Coursera, and I was reminded of it because you can take the most popular course at Yale for free on Coursera.com, and I'll link to that down below. It is about the science of well-being, and if there's ever a time where you need that, it's probably right now. It's all about how to incorporate those principles into your life. At least that's what it looks like, and I'm very interested. And like I said, you can take it for free, and I believe it's set up to be done over like a 5-week span, but you probably can do it in any way you want. If you want to do it faster, if you have extra time right now, that might be fun. So you can take the most popular course at Yale at your very own home. I think you can choose a paid version of the course and you'll get a certificate at the end, but to me that doesn't seem all that necessary. Just the course and the content sounds like what it's really all about. And another thing, the last thing, because I'm trying to make this a little bit faster and shorter than the last one. The last one was a little bit longer than I was planning on it being. Start a blog. I've been thinking about starting a blog for the longest time. I started putting one together last year, and then it kind of fell by the wayside because the content wasn't really what I was looking to do, and I've changed some. So, but I'm definitely thinking of starting a website. Definitely just as an actor, I want to start a website because that would be incredibly useful to have that set up. So that is what I'm planning on doing at some point in the very near future, and it sounds like this is a good time to do it. Obviously, people are online way more than they even were before, and we were already online a lot. So that sounds like a good thing, and I'll link to a couple of resources that I know of. But of course, if you just type in how to start a blog into the Google, you will come up with probably about millions upon millions of hits that could be very helpful. So if the information I link to down below doesn't help, you can find something else. I'm sure that's more up your alley as far as helping you set up a blog and a website and all that fun stuff. And this is the time to do it because, like I said, people are, as you know, people are online a whole lot right now. If you're a person who offers homeschooling resources, good grief, I've heard that those people are just overwhelmed with hits and clicks and everything, which is great because that stuff is really helpful. And right now you have a whole bunch of people who weren't ever planning on homeschooling who now have to and everything. So it's great that there are a lot of resources. It's one of the nice things about social media and the internet, and that's one of the things that I've heard people talking about recently, that it's times like these when you see the benefit of social media. We talk a lot about the bad side of social media and some of the negatives and some of the things that don't work, but it's times like these when the promise of it is coming through because it helps us connect with people in ways that we really need to because we can't connect physically. It doesn't replace connecting physically, and I think that's one of the things that's going to happen as we come out of this and as people come out of their isolation, that we're going to realize even more how much we need interpersonal connection and how much we need to come together like face-to-face, one-on-one, or as a group or something, and we're seeing how much we need that. But, in a time when we can't do that, we have this. Just think about during the influenza epidemic of 1918, they didn't have all these resources, so you could send a letter to somebody, and by the time it got to them, they could be dead, because even if they were alive when you wrote the letter, by the time it got to them, they could be dead because it could take so long to get to them, and they didn't have access to resources and everything. So there are good things about the internet and social media, and times like these you can kind of see how that plays out. So anyways, that is my virus diary number 2 from Wednesday, March 25th. We're still self-isolating. We are just doing the best we can. I have been out and about. Like I said, we're not under any kind of lockdown or stay inside kind of order. So I've been going to a neighborhood that's near me that has sidewalks, so I can take walks and can just experience being outside because that's good. It's really necessary at times like this. But other than that, not doing a whole lot else because obviously not a whole lot else I can do. I may be helping out a local nonprofit here in the next little bit, but we'll see how that pans out. I'm not sure. A friend of mine called me this morning actually about that. So we'll see, and it has stuff to do with videos because I've been doing this and I have some skills with this kind of thing. So anyways, that's it for Wednesday, March 25th. Like I said, I normally do skincare. So if skincare interests you, I'm planning on posting another skincare video this Friday, hopefully, if everything goes as planned. So join me again at that time. I'm hoping to get this video posted today, but it may be tomorrow morning just because I have some things I need to do tonight that will take up some time, but we'll see. But things are kind of continuing on, not a whole lot different than Monday. Doing a lot of reading. That's one good thing that's come out of this. I've been doing way more reading than I was earlier this year because I was trying to do other things and just kind of put reading on the back burner, and now reading is a little more on the front burner, and that's been really nice. I enjoy it. I encourage you to do anything you can to stay sane. Well, not anything, because there are probably some things you shouldn't be doing, but do what you can to stay calm and take care of your anxiety, and just trust that we're going to come through all of this. We're probably going to be different, but you know, there are some, I know this sounds like such a platitude, but there could be some good things that come out of this. There's going to be a lot of suffering. There's already been a lot of suffering. There will probably be more. In fact, I know there will be more, but you know, so a lot of times when you go through things like this, there are, like I said, sometimes good stuff and sometimes positive things can come out of stuff like this. And it's unfortunate that you have to go through crap to do that, but that's just life. So take care of yourself, wash your hands, click that subscribe button down below if more videos like this. Like I said, I'm planning on doing a video like this maybe every 2-3 days, just to talk about what things are like, what I've been up to, just share a few things that might be helpful. And on Friday, I should be posting another skincare video, if that sounds good to you. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video. Take care of yourself.